name is Linda Cowen. I'm the Chief Judge of the State Court of Clayton County. It's my privilege to read to you all today a story about Miss Alice Paul. Miss Paul and the President, the creative campaign for women's right to vote. It is written by Deanne Robbins and illustrated by Nancy Zhang. Alice Paul hurried up and down Pennsylvania Avenue in a purple hat. She wanted to make everything perfect for her parade, a parade no one in Washington, D.C. would ever forget. Alice double-checked the 26 floats and the 10 bands and the dozens of dancers. She took her place with 8,000 women. They wore colorful sashes and carried brightly painted signs. Alice held on to her hat so it would not blow off in the wind. She led the women up Pennsylvania Avenue to the White House. People lined the sidewalks to see the hullabaloo. Some of them cheered, but many jeered. No to votes for women, they called. Alice expected the jeers. Women could not vote in the United States, and most Americans did not think they should. She hoped her parade would help to change their minds. A mile away, Woodrow Wilson rode a train into Washington, D.C. The new president of the United States adjusted his spectacles. His daughter, Margaret, straightened his top hat. "Thousands of people will be here to meet you," she said. "You should look your best." President Wilson stepped off the train and waved, but no one waved back. The station was almost empty. The whole city had gone to see Alice Paul's parade instead. Who was the determined young woman in the purple hat? Alice Paul grew up on a farm. She liked to make mischief right alongside the boys in her town. They snuck candy and chased chickens and threw mud balls. Every 2 years, Alice watched her father go off to vote. Her mother had to stay at home. Why should it be that way? Alice read about her country's laws. The Constitution promised that people could elect their own leaders, but also said only men could vote. Weren't women people too? Shouldn't they be able to vote as citizens of the United States of America? Alice found books on women's suffrage. She learned that suffrage meant the right to vote. Suffragists wanted to change the Constitution so women could help elect their own leaders just as men did. They needed to convince the president and Congress, but the politicians in Washington, D.C. would not listen. Alice had lots of ideas for making them listen. When she was old enough, she joined the other suffragists who demanded the right to vote. She impressed those women with her big parade on Pennsylvania Avenue. She impressed them even more when she set up a meeting with President Woodrow Wilson himself. President Wilson wanted to see the woman who had caused the hullabaloo. He thought she might apologize to him. After all, she had stolen the spotlight on his first day in Washington, D.C. Alice did not plan to apologize. She sat down in the president's office and looked him right in the eye. "Mr. President, will you support the vote for women?" she asked. The president did not expect so bold a question from this small woman in a purple hat. Miss Paul, the time is not right. I have many more important problems to worry about. President Wilson got to work on his problems. Alice got to work too. She opened an office in Washington, D.C. for a new group called the National Women's Party. Thousands of women joined. They called Alice their dear little leader. The dear little leader wanted to show the president that women's rights were as important as anything else in the United States. She would do it by making mischief, just as she had growing up on the farm. Margaret Wilson stared out the White House window. "Father, come look." Alice led a fleet of fancy cars up Pennsylvania Avenue. Women honked their horns and waved their yellow flags. Congressmen came out of the Capitol to find a long scroll unfurled on the marble steps. Support the vote for women. A funny-looking train chugged from the East Coast to the West Coast. Alice had named it the Suffrage Special. The train stopped in towns along the way, and families came out to gawk at it. Women made speeches from the caboose. Send a letter to the president. Tell him to support women's right to vote. President Wilson got bags of letters from all around the country. They piled up to the ceiling in his office. The president had other problems to worry about. He did not take time to read the letters about women's suffrage, but Margaret read them instead. That winter, Margaret sat next to her father in the president's car. A strange sight greeted them at the White House gate. Women strode back and forth, carrying signs. President Wilson spotted Alice at the front of the group. She looked him right in the eye. The president glanced down at his newspaper, but Margaret waved at Alice through the window. Alice and her friends paced in front of the White House day after day in the freezing cold. People lined the sidewalks to see the hullabaloo. Some of them jeered, but many cheered. They brought scarves and mittens to keep the women warm. The police ordered Alice to leave the White House grounds. Not until the president supports the woman's right to vote. The police put the women in handcuffs and took them off to jail, just as Alice hoped they would. President Wilson did not like the thought of Alice in jail. He knew she loved the United States. Why else would she go to all this trouble to vote in her country's elections? "Maybe women's suffrage is more important than I thought," he said. Margaret looked her father right in the eye, just the way Alice Paul had. "Yes, to the vote for women," she said. The president would make a speech, a very important speech. Alice stood with others from the National Women's Party. She wondered what the president would say. Woodrow Wilson adjusted his spectacles. Margaret straightened his tie. "People all over the country will read about your speech," she said. "You should look your best." The president faced the crowd. "The time is right. I will ask Congress to pass a law giving all women the vote." The women waved yellow handkerchiefs and threw yellow flowers. "3 cheers for President Wilson," they shouted, and 3 cheers for Alice Paul. Two years later, Alice skipped down Pennsylvania Avenue to vote in the 1920 election. She filled out her ballot and waved her arm in victory. The end. There is an author's note. Alice Paul and the National Woman's Party had a lot of work to do after convincing President Woodrow Wilson to support a woman's right to vote. They still needed Congress to change the Constitution. The women held meetings with many congressmen, and the president helped by making speeches in favor of women's suffrage. After many twists and turns, Congress passed the 19th Amendment to the Constitution on June 4th, 1919. But the battle wasn't over. 36 state governments had to approve the amendment before it could become law. Alice threw herself into the campaign by giving talks, sending hundreds of letters around the country, and speaking with every politician who might help. She also asked supporters to march through the streets dressed in yellow, the favorite color of the women's suffrage movement. One by one, 35 state governments voted in favor of the amendment. It all came down to Tennessee, where the vote was tied. The youngest politician in the state, Harry Byrne, had not yet voted, unsure of what to do. Then he got a letter from his mother that said, "Hurrah, and vote for suffrage." Harry did, and the 19th Amendment finally became a part of the Constitution on August 26, 1920. Millions of American women voted for the first time in the 1920 election, including a very happy Alice Paul. Every time that you, as a woman or a man, have the right to vote, please exercise that right. It's very important for all of us as citizens of the United States. Thanks for letting me read to you. Bye.